Sarah felt like she couldn't talk. All she wanted to do was curl up in bed and cry herself to sleep, which is what she had been doing except without a bed for most of the day. She wanted things to go back to normal. Even though her dad was a bit excessive, he still loved her, and she loved him. He was always there for her, especially when she lost her mom. And Zeke, she didn't think he would like her, but to her surprise, she had become the boyfriend she always wanted. He made her laugh, feel comfortable, and help her grow as a person. And now that he's gone, worst of all, she thought it was her fault. I've talked to a couple people in your group, and they told me you've had a rough day, Jonah said as he sat across from her. She didn't respond. She just kept looking down her shoes. I had people I cared about. I had a family. One by one, they died. I could have just given up and accept the fact that my son and I were going to be next, but no, I never fought and I never grown up. You think at that point life has given you shit? Now it's time for you to decide. Are you going to give up and spend the rest of your days thinking about the past, or are you going to step up? Sarah looked over at him. He had a stern look on his face. Your group says that you are strong, but right now I don't see it. I see a scared, wimpy girl who wants to give up and die. Prove me wrong. His voice was also very stern. Sarah still didn't respond, and Jonah sighed and he said, that usually helps get people riled up. Do you want me to get someone from your group? Sarah gave a small nod. Alright, whose? A couple minutes passed by without a response before Jonah went up to the door. Rebecca, can you come here, please? Jonah said. Of course. Won't mind if I bring Genevieve? Rebecca asked. I don't mind, Jonah said. Rebecca entered the room and took a seat next to Sarah. She had Genevieve on her lap, and Jonah sat in his chair across from the two. Hey, Sarah, Rebecca said, as she reached down and placed a comforting hand on the teenager's shoulder. Sarah looked up and jumped back, but from the hand. It's okay, Rebecca said, as she lowered her hand. I miss when they were little, Jonah said, as he watched Genevieve. So curious about the world that they don't have the ability to curse at you yet. Rebecca chuckled and said, yeah, I guess so. Anyway, I wasn't getting any responses from her, Jonah said as she made a gesture to Sarah. I wish you could have let me come here and to begin with, Rebecca said. My apologies. I have to take extra precautions these days. I have to make sure your story's lined up. And so far they do, Jonah said. I have a few questions about Sarah that you may be able to answer to, Jonah said. I'll do my best, Sarah said. Excellent. What happened at Carver's? Jonah said. As we were there as prisoners, I think my daughter Clementine got the worst of it. She was forced to be away from me, Alvin and Genevieve. She saw two of her friends die. One of them was a gruesome murderer. Carver beheaded a man named Vince. He was such a good man. And as for her other friend Kenny, he was one of the people she knew from when the civilization fell, and the rest of us were forced to do labor, Rebecca said. I see. Now, can you tell me how Sarah ended up with Carver and his people to begin with? Some of your people said they lived at Carver before wanting to leave, Jonah said. Carlos, the father, told me about what happened when it all started. It was just Sarah and her mom and Carlos himself. At the very beginning, her mom got bit. Carlos was a doctor, so he tried to nurse her back to health, but she didn't make it. Sarah became depressed after that, and she wouldn't talk for weeks. It wasn't until they found House, and I started to talk to her that she needed to get better. It took a while, but Sarah did recover enough where she could talk. She would also smile sometimes. I see, but she never got over that kind of grief, Jonah said. I know that. I was just glad that she was willing to talk to some people again, Rebecca said. I see, Jonah said. How was her relationship with Clementine? It was very good. They were inseparable, Rebecca said. I think they were able to help each other for grief. And what about now? Has things changed? Jonah asked. Rebecca nodded and she said, a little bit. Clementine is very mature for her age. She knows that Sarah needs space right now, so she'll talk to us when she's ready. So she lost her father? Jonah asked. Could you give me more details? She also lost her boyfriend Zeke. We don't, Rebecca said before she was interrupted by Sarah. I didn't lose them. Sarah turned back to Rebecca turned back to look at Sarah with shock. They're missing. They'll be here soon, Sarah said, as she was starting to look down at her feet. Sarah, honey, they're gone. You said they were gone, Rebecca said. Sarah shook her head and she said, Stop lying to me. She got up and said, I'm going to go wait for them. She then proceeded to leave the room. Sarah, Rebecca said. She got up, but the teenager didn't listen and left the room. Clementine watched as Sarah leave the small office. She didn't even bother looking at her. Clementine was about to call her, but was stopped when she heard her adoptive mother talking about Jonah. I'm sorry. She doesn't normally do that. She then looked over to see Jonah and Rebecca at the doorway with Genevieve in Rebecca's arms. It seemed like the toddler was getting restless and started to squirm. I understand that's just part of grieving, Jonah said. It's happened more than once. Anyway, thank you for answering my questions, Rebecca. I believe your daughter's the last person I need to interview. Rebecca nodded and she said, Okay, Clem's just been through a lot, so be easy on her. I will, Jonah said. He turned to the child and made a gesture for her to come inside. Clementine obliged and made his way into the office. She went over and sat down on one of the chairs, while Jonah sat a chair across from her. I heard you said you had a long week. You could say that again, Clementine said. So your friend Luke told me that you killed Carver, Jonah said. Clementine looked up at the man before nodding her head. She felt so ashamed of doing what she did so awful. Carver did deserve it, but she felt sick about doing it. He killed someone very important to me, Clementine said. He was a person that was with me from the beginning. Jonah nodded and said, Rebecca told me about that. Those people are so rare nowadays. I feel the word kill is an understatement. You slaughtered him. You slashed out at your friend who tried to stop you. Clementine hung her head. I didn't mean to. I understand, but it makes me feel very nervous to have you in the community. Carver did deserve that. He quite killed a few people, of my people. But what you did can't ever happen again, Jonah said. I didn't mean to get that far, Clementine said. She looked back at Jonah. Between being tortured and losing my best friend, I just lost it. Tortured? Now that's something I haven't heard yet, Jonah said with a shocked look on his face. Clementine gasped when she realized what she just said. She never wanted to get out that she was tortured by Carver. What did Carver do to torture you? Jonah asked. Clementine looked up at the man before removing the jacket. She winced in pain in her arms and then carefully moved the dress's sleeve to reveal her scarred arms. I see. Was Gil also put through this torture? Jonah asked. No, Clementine said as she pulled her sleeves back down. Carver wanted me to torture him to get information. I refused and he used his knife to hurt me. I see. So, does anyone besides you and Gil know about this? Jonah asked. No, Clementine said. I was going to tell my mom and dad when we were safe. Jonah nodded his head and said, So Clementine, can you tell me why Carver was so interested in you? I think he wanted a family and he was willing to cross any line to get it. He wanted me to be his daughter, his heir, Clementine said. And thus he drove you himself mad at the idea of taking you over. That helps me to understand him a little more, Jonah said. Thank you, Clementine. Now one other question that remains. What happened before you were found by Carver and his people? What was your relationship with this friend? What was his name, Kenny? Clementine nodded and she huffed and said, When the dead started to walk, a man named Lee found me. He took care of me. We met up with other survivors and we tried to make it, but it didn't work. They either died or went missing. The friend I lost that night was Lee's friend. And last night, he had a family at one point. Regardless of what happened, Kenny was always there for Lee when they didn't agree with one another. I see. So why doesn't it work? Was people or the dead? Jonah asked. People. It's always people, Clementine said. That's what I thought, Jonah said. You know, I had a friend once. We knew each other since childhood, and he and I were inseparable. He was like a brother to me, until he tried to kill me. He started up a bloodthirsty coup. If there's anything I've learned in this world, is that people aren't always working at an angle. I just hope that you and your people are nothing like him. What about you and your people? Are you working at the angle too? Clementine asked. Jonah chuckled and he said, Smart girl. In a way, yes. I am working at an angle and I'm trying to expand this community. We're trying to rebuild society as much as we need the help as possible to achieve that goal. Clementine nodded. That would be nice, Clementine said. Indeed. Okay, so answer all my questions. Henry is going to blow a gasket when I bring him here for all this information, Jonah said. Who's Henry? Clementine asked. Henry oversees the recording of what we do on a day-to-day basis. Most of the time it's the same days, but on days like today, he'll have to record you and your people, Jonah said. That's cool, Clementine said. So why would you say he was going to blow a gasket? Simple, I just made his job harder on him today, Jonah said. He got up and walked over to the door. It seemed like he and I are going to be busy. I'll have to tell him about everything that happened to you and your group. They made their way over to the factory with Jonah's guards following behind them. In the meantime, you and your group can get settled in. They approached a woman who wore a light blue hooded sweatshirt with a pair of blue jeans and a pair of black boots. She had blonde hair with a few piercings in her ears. I'll leave you two in the capable hands of Julie. She will get you to your new home and hopefully some new clothes too, no offense. None taken. It was the only way to get through the herd of walkers, Clementine said. Walkers? Now that's a new, Jonah said. I think I like it a lot better than chompers. What do you think, Julie? He turned to the woman. Anything is better than chomper. Leave it to us and come up with the worst nicknames for those outside, Julie said. Sheesh. Now that's what I call brutal, honestly, Jonah said. You asked for it, Julie said. Indeed I did, Jonah said. All right, Sass Master. Can you get Clementine to the rest of her group? Sure. Come here, kid, Julie said, as she and Clementine walked away from Jonah, who was going off in a different direction. Clementine continued to follow Julie as she looked back to Jonah occasionally. He did seem like a nice guy, but she wasn't so sure if she could trust him completely. After all, Carver started out as a nice man too. All right, we're here, Julie said, as she approached the houses with Clementine walking next to her. There was enough to split you two up in different houses. Which one I'm staying in? Clementine asked. I don't know yet. Whoever you feel comfortable with, Julie said. Some group members brought over some clothes for you and your people. Might as well get rid of what you're wearing. There's no way we can wash that out. Clementine nodded in agreement. She said, Thanks. No prob. Someone will get you your dinner. Until then, hang out. We might have some chores for you in the morning, Julie said. She walked away from the girl. As she walked away, Gil came out of one of the houses. He waved at her. Clementine smiled before she walked over to him. He was wearing some new clothes, and he was now wearing a dark green hooded sweater with a white shirt underneath, a pair of blue jeans, and a pair of brown boots. Hey, Clem, Gil said. Hey, Gil, you seem refreshed, Clementine said. I am. It feels nice to be in some fresh clothes that aren't covered in walker guts, Gil said. Yeah, is my dad inside? Clementine asked. Yeah, he's inside with Luke and Genevieve. Rebecca's talking to Sarah. I think she's trying to get her to come back here, Gil said. Clementine nodded as she was concerned for her friend's well-being. She did wish she could do something for her. It was painful to see her best friend become distant. Her thoughts were broken up when Gil said, I'm sure Rebecca can help her. She reminds me of my adoptive mom. She would always comfort me in the first few weeks after I lost my parents. You had adopted parents? Clementine asked. Yeah, we got separated about a day after Carver's people found me, Gil said. I just hope they're alive. They've been looking for me since day one. What happened to your biological parents, if you don't mind me asking? Clementine asked. Gil huffed and said, They went out to find food and never came back. There were more of us, Randy and Patricia. They were people that would later adopt me. They were good friends with my mom and dad. Oh, I'm sorry, Clementine said. It's okay. They helped me through it. I just hope they're okay, Gil said. Gil? The two children heard. The boy perked up when he heard the voice. The two children looked up to see a man and a woman. The man had red hair and a beard, wore a gray sweatshirt and pair of cargo pants, and a pair of boots. The woman wore an orange coat with the black thermal shirt underneath, some pair of blue jeans, and pair of blue boots. Mom, Dad, Gil said with a smile on his face. He went over to the two adults. Gil's adoptive mother cried tears of joy as she hugged the boy and kissed his forehead repeatedly while Gil's adoptive father hugs them both. Clementine watched as she watched a happy reunion. She wiped away a few tears from her eyes. At least something good came out of this day.